Trent Williams just throwing a guy.
That was funny. Like a rag doll. Just get out of the way.
I was like, I do not want to get into a beef with Trent Williams.
Ever.
He's like, he picked up like a 220-pound man and threw him like a sack of laundry. It was crazy. All right, welcome to another episode of What Are They Going to Say Now? This is Jay and Tony, as always, and this week we're going to talk a little recap and repercussions and fallout of the AFC and AFC Championship games from last weekend, and we're going to hold off on our Super Bowl preview until next week because there's that 2-week break, and then we're going to get into some NBA, LeBron, how different teams are looking at this point, and take it from there.
Sounds good.
So to get us started, let's go with the first game, the NFC Championship, which was a total bummer between the Niners and Eagles. First the Eagles go down the field. The refs missed a huge call, calling a complete catch when it hits the ground. Shanahan should have challenged it, and he would have won the challenge. I don't know why he didn't. When the other team's panicking and running and getting up to snap the ball for another play, I know they do that anyway, just anytime it's close, even if they did catch it, because you can make the team waste a challenge and lose a timeout. But it was really obvious given that was fourth down, it was such a consequential turn of events, and he was down to like the 2-yard line. I don't know how Shanahan didn't challenge that, but it's a moot point because then on the Niners' first drive with the ball, Purdy gets hurt, and he turned out to be fully hurt. It's a torn UCL in his throwing arm. So, really a bummer because we didn't get a game. We didn't get a real game.
Yep.
Eagles fans are cocky idiots about it too. They're like, oh, we had you guys anyway. It wouldn't have mattered. It's like, you don't know that at all. You got lucky on the touchdown because of, the call on the catch, whatever. Niners, even with Josh Johnson or center, did get a drive down and tied the game. And then, Johnson fumbles in the red zone. After the initial drive, the Niners defense had adjusted really well to that Eagles offense. It's not like they were walking all over them at all. So we don't know what would have happened, and it's a bummer. No one knows.
Yeah, it was still 7-0 for a long time. And that 7, like you said, was kind of a fluky. They shouldn't have even had 7 points. So it didn't feel like it was over at that point, but
it was over when Johnson botched the snap.
Yeah, right.
In their own end of the field, and then you're like,
that was terrible. Yeah.
Yeah, and at that point it was over. And what I found most disappointing, it was just a boring game. Can you imagine dropping like $1,000 on tickets to go to that game? Even if you're an Eagles fan, you're like, well, that sucked. Like, you're excited that your team won and is going to the Super Bowl, but you would have hoped for a real game.
Yeah, it's funny. My brother-in-law has a vendor through his work who was possibly going to get me a ticket to that game, and I was like, "Oh man, yes, please, anything you could do." And I'm like, I'm kind of glad that didn't go through.
Yeah,
I would have been miserable. I would have had to, First of all, you can't even really I guess you can go in like proudly repping your team's gear, but Philly's one of those places that
you don't want to.
It's just
someone might purposely throw up on you.
Yeah,
it's happened.
Or you get knifed or whatever, you never know. Like they're crazy out there. So
yeah, they are.
It was a bummer of a game. And like the thing you're left coming away with it is there's just so many questions now, right? It's like I don't know what happens next at the most important position. So
before we get too deep into that situation, I do want to talk about the game itself. And what I also thought was disappointing was Shanahan essentially gave up. It was over, and the second Purdy got hurt, it was over.
Right.
It's a good Eagles team. You're not gonna beat them with Josh Johnson, and so it was over regardless.
And even Johnson got hurt though, right? And then
Johnson gets hurt, and then he really gave up. And I thought it was frustrating because let's have some fun with this. You have nothing to lose at this point. let's go into a shotgun wildcat formation. I want Deebo Samuel and Christian McCaffrey side by side. I want to see some crazy shit with our talent. Like, let's do some wild stuff.
As well, right?
You have some of those plays in the playbook. We saw McCaffrey throw to Deebo for a touchdown against the Rams in the game that mattered earlier in the season. They did none of that. It was like, hands it off to McCaffrey, blah, blah, blah. And they worked it first for a little bit. And then it became clear that Purdy could not throw the ball more than 5 yards because he had no UCL. And you cannot have a running game if there's zero threat of a pass aside from a screen pass. And you can protect against that just the same. Yeah. So Shanahan just phoned it in. I was like, well, why don't we just kneel down 4 straight plays and run the clock out? I've seen the argument, well, you get your guys back there and you're doing some wacky stuff and somebody gets hurt. Well, pounding McCaffrey over and over and over again for the entire second half is just as likely to lead to an injury. So what's the difference? It's the end of the season. Why not? Let's get some hook and ladder. You only want to throw the ball. Let's get some laterals. Let's do some crazy shit. McCaffrey has a decent arm. It was disappointing just in that. It was like, let's give it something.
I would have liked to see McCaffrey get a chance to throw more than he did. Because I know they were saying he was like the ultimate backup, right? Like if it gets down to technically
the fifth stringer on the quarterback depth chart.
I guess he just didn't want to go that route, and you are taking away your key running back out of the unless you're just having him shotgun the ball and.
Well, that's what I said. You do wildcat, and you have a threat. You know what's going to happen.
Something. I thought that's what they were going to do, and it just seemed like
Deebo has a decent arm too. We've seen Deebo pass for a touchdown the year before last, also against the Rams. Enough. Maybe if we were playing the Rams, Kyle would have brought out the tricks. I really don't understand it. It was like, why? I mean, honestly, to start the second half, you're like, why don't they just kneel down 4 times, turn over the ball? Then the Eagles can do the same thing, which I was kind of shocked with the Eagles and Sirianni. A couple times in the second half, Hurts is running the ball. What are you doing? The game is over. You're risking, you're going to the Super Bowl. You're risking hurting your quarterback who was just injured with the shoulder. He was running the ball. What on earth? And do you know how he would have been vilified if Hurts got hurt on in the second half on some stupid shit like that? It was. I was just shaking my head. So let's come back around to what you were going into. The 49ers quarterback situation is really interesting for next season. First, we have Trey Lance, who was injured in the early in the second game of the season. He's going to be healthy and good to go. He seems like their most likely option. The reports of Purdy are that it was a clean UCL tear, so he might need a regular surgery, not a Tommy John surgery. That's a big difference. The difference is the recovery time on a regular surgery is like 6 months. Tommy John is 12 plus, which means he's out for all of next year. So he is potentially in play, but he'll be coming back from not throwing the ball for, 4 or 5 months in between and rehab and all that. But he looked great. So, I mean, if he wasn't injured, it was a sure thing that Purdy was the Niners starter next year. Now it's definitely not. Maybe with Purdy, if it's a shorter surgery and he can come back, him and Lance compete against each other in camp. Jimmy Garoppolo played great in his time coming back, and especially the circumstances before he got hurt. He played great for the Niners, but he's just not an option, I think, because if you're him and, the team has already moved on from you before, why do you want to sign a contract knowing there's a chance you get benched? Why would the Niners pay him the amount of money that he's going to get on the open market? I don't see it happening. I see Jimmy playing for maybe the Raiders.
That'd be interesting.
Potentially the Jets. The Jets have a talented roster. And Robert Saleh used to be the Niners defensive coordinator, is the coach. So you have that connection there. He could go to Miami because Tua, we don't know what's up with Tua and the head stuff. And Mike McDaniels, former Niners coordinator, knows Jimmy very well. DeMeco Ryans, this season's defensive coordinator for the Niners, just hired by Houston. Congratulations to him. That guy deserves it big time.
He just definitely deserves it. We're going to miss him.
I thought he might end up in Houston because he played there as a player for 6 years. So he's familiar with the organization and all of that. And who knows, Houston might be looking at a quarterback too. Maybe he go, and with that relationship, maybe they get Jimmy. So Jimmy's going to go somewhere. He's not going to be on the Niners. I would be very surprised because he showed out when he played. He proved himself, and
Yeah.
So good for him in that regard. And then originally there were some Tom Brady rumors, which were getting a little goofy because it's like he's clearly had it. And then just yesterday he says, "I'm retired
Bye-bye.
for good this time."
Yeah.
So I want to say thank God we don't have to spend months of hearing ESPN
Brady
and
to the
different
Niners.
radio hosts going, Brady to the Niners. It's still going to happen. And they're still going to drag it out and go, he might come out of retirement again.
Yeah.
And he sounded pretty definitive this time. Like, no.
Yeah. Well, I think he realizes he should have.
Yeah.
So.
And then so the other rumor would be Aaron Rodgers, also a Northern California native, coming back to his childhood team because it sounds like his tenure with the Packers is over, but he's still under contract. So the Niners would have to trade draft picks or players for him. And they're already light on draft picks.
Yeah.
I don't see that happening. They're not going to mortgage even more of the future for a 39-year-old quarterback.
Right. How many good years does he have left? You know what I mean? If you're like signing a long-term deal with him.
Yeah. I mean, he played decently this last season.
He did.
I would be higher on him play-wise coming in than Brady for sure.
Yeah.
But I don't see it happening unless it's a serious. Well, he can't give a discount because he already has a contract. Right. So one, you have to give up assets to get him, and two, salary cap issues. It's a big contract. So I don't even think they can make that work without depleting their roster in a way that what's the point?
Right.
So it's going to be a Lance Purdy training camp battle. I mean, if there was no health involved, they're both coming back from injuries. So kind of even footing in that regard. It's got to be Purdy though. Still,
right. His track record.
If he's eligible to play next year, injury health wise, it's got to be Purdy in the lead position, depending on how the rehab goes and the timeline on that.
Right.
Otherwise, it's going to be Trey Lance because they still, we still don't really know what we have with him. We've seen some potential, but he still lacks experience. And what I do think you're going to see, the most likely quarterback signing by the Niners is an experienced, decent veteran as a backup quarterback who is a serviceable starter, but a veteran presence for these two young guys. Because Jimmy was really great about working with both of them. They both Purdy and Lance had nothing but great things to say about Jimmy, helping out with film review and just all those things, right? So they're going to have to bring in a player like that just as a veteran presence for that quarterback room. That's what's going to happen.
Right. Yeah, and I think that that they have to do that anyways, right? I mean that's got to be
anyway. Yeah.
Right.
So that's your most likely scenario.
Yeah.
And maybe we should look for two of those, the way things have been going for 49ers quarterbacks, because we needed a fifth.
Right. Yeah, it just sucks, man, for those young guys. I mean, I felt really bad for Trey when his injury happened. And then especially Purdy, like at that time of the year, right? He was getting ready to shine or have his opportunity to shine. And it's just a fluke, your elbow snaps back the wrong way and that's it, and it's like, you could just tell he really wished he could go and do more than he did, but he could not. His arm would not. Physically, he couldn't.
By the way, what a gamer for going back out there with a snapped UCL and throwing some screen passes and stuff.
Right.
That's tough.
Yeah, it is. It is. But I mean, we didn't have an option. I mean, I guess unless they could have done the Wildcat style like you were talking about, and maybe that's what we should have done. I think a lot of people were questioning Shanahan after the game, like, why'd you do what you did?
It was just boring. Yeah. Like, give us something fun to watch.
I mean, it's a chance for the Super Bowl, right? You would think you'd throw everything at the wall.
Yeah, I mean, it was over, but why not try? What I will say, this loss, the way everything happened, didn't really hurt. I wasn't upset, or it was just, last year I thought we were a better team than the Rams.
Yeah.
Dropped interception away from the Super Bowl. Very painful. I was at that game. That sucked. That was brutal. That was a tough loss. This year, I felt like if you told me before the year we'd be on our third string rookie quarterback and in that game to begin with, I would have said, wow. I mean, so
you can't really ask for more.
We were playing, the 49ers were playing with house money at that point. It was amazing. They were as far as they were given everything that had happened. And you can't say it was a failure of a season. That was an absolute success. You
Yeah.
discovered Purdy. You almost made it to the Super Bowl anyway. So, their prospects moving forward are still looking good, depending on health, of course. But I think it was a very successful season. So it wasn't some crushing loss at all. Far, far from it.
No, I agree. And, there's a little bit of a, you could tell that they were upset and they felt bad. And then there's some chippiness at the end of the game and all that stuff. And it's just like
Trent Williams just throwing a guy.
That was funny. Like a rag doll. Just get out of the way.
I was like,
Just
I do not want to
him.
get into a beef with Trent Williams.
Ever.
He's like, he picked up like a 220-pound man and threw him like a sack of laundry. It was crazy.
Yeah, it was insane. But yeah, I mean, it's just, it's a disappointing end to the run that we had. But like you said, you can't really be too upset because we didn't have a chance with all the injuries we had. So
yeah. Let's move on to the AFC Championship game. So we had another battle between the Chiefs and Bengals, and this is starting now, especially with KC winning this
rivalry,
to turn into a really good rivalry. These teams do not like each other. Mm-hmm. It was a really good game again between these teams, just like last year. Mm-hmm. Came down to the last second. Last year went to overtime. This time Mahomes got it done, and man, I was so impressed by Mahomes because, I mean, high ankle sprains are a big deal. He would usually be out a couple of weeks minimum with that injury. Right. And what I also liked, he wasn't being a drama queen out there. He taped it up and was really trying to just play and not act it up, like showboat and be what I mean? Like exaggerate the injury. But you could tell a couple times he had to run to his left, plant that right foot down to release the ball in the pass.
Yeah.
And then he goes hobbling away. And I mean, I think now, I mean, Mahomes has a Super Bowl, but I think his most legendary career moment now is that last play of the game to set the field goal where he's scrambling, clearly hurting, scrambling to go, get extra yardage to shorten the field goal. And then the push out of bounds, which if any Bengals fans are trying to say that shouldn't have been a penalty, they're delusional.
Right.
He was definitely fully out of bounds, shoved hard in the back into the bench.
Yeah.
I don't want to hear it. Sorry. Right. 10 out of 10 times, that is a penalty.
For sure. Yeah. I felt bad for the kid who did it. I don't think that was he just was trying to run and stop him from the first down. Yeah. And he just barreled right into him.
Yeah. I mean, you got to be more disciplined, but it happens.
You do. Yeah.
And you can't blame it all on that one play either.
No. Right.
I would argue, I thought was it a punt or a kickoff? It was a punt. And Kansas City had a huge return on that punt. And I thought that was a big mistake given how little time was on the clock. Like, you got to punt that thing out of bounds, even if you lose 15 yards on, because it was a sizable return that set them up for that in the first place. So, I mean, lots of little mistakes. And
it's not one play. Yeah.
Burrow versus Mahomes, though, becoming a really good rivalry. Now that both sides have won, and I feel like the better team won this time.
For sure. Yeah. And I think, and that was with a not quite fully healthy Mahomes, right? I think if Mahomes was fully healthy, I think it would have been even a more comfortable win, I think. But Cincinnati played well,
They did.
Think it was a very close game. Like I said, I picked Kansas City to win it, but I didn't think it was going to be easy, and it wasn't. So
yeah,
it's going to be interesting to see that matchup. I know we're not talking about that yet, but in a couple weeks,
we'll get into that next week.
Yeah. So injury wise, see how Mahomes heals up.
Yeah. Well, at least we got, one good game on the weekend after the snoozer of the first one.
Oh, so if that second one was a snoozer also, that would have been horrible.
Yeah.
That first game was not fun.
All right. Well, let's move on to the before we move on to the NBA, let's talk about the Broncos traded for Sean Payton as their head coach, and supposedly he's getting in the ballpark of $20 million a year, easily the biggest coaching deal of all time.
Wow.
And I really like this move. They had to give up more picks, which between the Russell Wilson trade and the Payton trade, man, the Broncos don't have a lot of picks left. They've given up a
No.
lot, but they're stuck with Russell Wilson after that extension. So they need someone to come in and fix that offense. And I love the hire of Sean Payton. I think, first of all, I mean, there's a lot of reports of Russ's ego and let Russ cook and all that, and him finally butting heads with Pete Carroll. I think Sean Payton has enough gravitas and respect to come in and command that locker room. And I think Wilson was definitely humbled this past year. So I'm expecting a pretty good turnaround. Wilson's declined for sure, but he still can be better than he was last year in a better system. And I think it's a smart hire. I mean, you're kind of stuck, so you might as well go all in.
Yeah, I think Peyton's a really good offensive coach, just kind of an innovative, he you know, when he coached in New Orleans with Drew Brees, like he always found very inventive ways to open the offense up. And I think that's definitely what Denver needs, because whatever happened last year, and you know, I think it had a lot to do with Wilson also, but I think it was just he didn't mesh with the offensive unit and the offensive playbook well.
Well, and so you had a rookie head coach too,
coach
who was questionable right out the gates. You know?
So you bring in Peyton, who's got a lot of experience, who's a very innovative coach. I think it'll be good.
And when I feel like an aging quarterback in his mid-30s with all that experience, I don't generally feel like an aging quarterback and a first-time head coach is a great combination for anybody, really. You know, there's a certain aspect where the quarterback who's got a Super Bowl ring is like, well, where have you been? You know, like you don't know. You know what I mean? Whereas Peyton will command much more respect. Right. And he's just a great coach too. So
no, I think it'll be a good fit. So
okay, and let's go NBA. And what's been dominating the news cycle on 2 points is we got to talk about LeBron James. So let's first start with they're playing the Celtics. It's coming down to the final play of the game of regulation. It's a tie game. LeBron goes in for a layup. He's fouled. It's not a hard foul, but he's fouled. It's clearly foul. And the refs miss it and they don't call it. It happens. It happens a lot in the NBA. LeBron reacts by throwing a temper tantrum. Like like he's rolling on the floor and acting like he got shot. And it's embarrassing. Like, yeah, they missed the call. It's also a tie game and you still have overtime. So it's just very unbecoming of an all-time great. Like, don't act like that. You know, just rolling on the ground and crying about it. And just, you know, the Lakers fans are acting like the entire season's been robbed now from the refs. It's like, no, you guys sucked before any of this. Okay. And LeBron gets so many calls in his favor. He gets the full superstar treatment. And I don't really have a problem with that, because just like Jordan, you earn that. You earn that by being dominant. Whistles in your favor. Fine. Let's acknowledge that he gets whistles in his favor. And if they miss one, don't act like it's a crime against humanity. Right.
I mean, yeah, you said it perfectly. I mean, it was just so over the top, so unnecessary. And, you know, the refs miss a call. Refs miss calls all the time. You know, that's a bad time to miss a call. But there's a lot of superstars. I mean, we know one on our team who don't get calls way more often than him.
Yeah.
And, he gets upset, and, there's times where he'll lash out a little bit, but Steph would have been ejected. Yeah. I feel like for any other player, right?
Can you imagine LeBron, how he would react if he got the same whistle that Steph doesn't get, I should say?
Yeah. I can't. If that's what he does on a missed call, I can't imagine it. It would, it would just be ridiculous. But it just, and this is the stuff, all-time great player. I think we both acknowledge one of the most talented players ever. We have him up there in, whatever you want to say, top 3 all-time, whatever it is. But this is the stuff that it just makes you not, it's just, it irks you,
it's just not necessary.
It's not necessary, and it, rolling around, it's showing up the refs, It's, rolling around on the ground. I mean, he's doing somersaults and he's on his knees, with the pose up in the air. Like, come on, man.
One thing I will say, I doubt it'll happen, but I would like to see come out of this because it was so high profile. I would like, and I think the refs would like this, in late game situations, say in the last 2 minutes, I think the officials should be allowed to initiate a review. Just like they are in the NFL. It can come up from upstairs in the booth. We're going to review this, right? I guarantee you the officials would have loved to have taken a look at that, just given the circumstances. So I wouldn't mind giving them that power. Because, I mean, NBA officiating, we do bag on these guys, and sometimes they really deserve it. But it's tough.
Mm-hmm. It is. It is. And, they're asked to make split-second judgment calls, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes you miss stuff. It's tough to miss it at that point in the game, like we said. I think we both, recognize that. But I think part of the reason they won't do that is because there was already complaints about challenges.
Slow. Yeah, it is
the
slow
game
at the
down.
end of the game. That's true.
So they're not going to do it. But
yeah, you're right.
I understand the intent of it. I personally wouldn't mind it because I think the more important thing is to get the call right.
Right.
But I think that they're just going to basically, honestly, what I think is going to happen is that the Lakers are going to get favorable calls for a while.
I think that's why they're, making such a big deal out of it. But I mean, 100%. Everybody gets bad calls, and they get plenty of good calls in their favor all the time.
I don't know.
Do you know how many times LeBron goes to the hoop with a full-out arm bar on the defender and shoves him off his feet, off the back?
Yeah. Yeah.
Never called. So,
right.
It was a pivotal moment in the game, but let's calm down, especially like you guys are under 500. Okay.
Yeah.
Take it easy.
The best part though was Patrick Beverley coming up to the refs. Did you see this? After that play call, he has like literally like a camera. I think he borrowed it from one of the guys.
Oh, I did see that. Yeah.
Coming up to the refs and like showing them the play, and they're like, technical, what are you doing? Like, we realized we might have messed that up, but come on now. Like, you know what I mean? Well, they didn't give LeBron the technical, but they gave it quick to Patrick Beverley, so that was funny.
It is worth pointing out that we do see a lot of circumstantial calls in the NBA, and this was one of them.
Yeah.
It was a tie game. If the Lakers had been down by 1 or 2, they would have blown the whistle for sure.
Right.
If they were up, they wouldn't tie. They figure, let's look at overtime versus trying to be involved too much. Obviously, they messed up, but I get that. We see it all the time with, like we'll see Curry, for example, but there's other examples as well, shooting a three-pointer. And it's one of those ones where it's definitely a foul, but you can tell if it goes in, they don't call it. But if it misses, then they blow the whistle and call it. Yeah. And you see it happen all the time. It's circumstantial.
Yeah.
Which, I think that's just human nature, and I'm most of the time I'm actually okay with it. I feel like they kind of balance it pretty well for the most part. It's not really something that could be easily avoided.
Yeah. No, I agree. Like we said, it's a hard job. I think there's definitely times where we don't agree with how they're doing their job and they miss the call. It happens. But like we're saying, all-time great, one of the older players in the league, right? You just expect more from him. You know what I mean? I understand, like, being upset, pleading with the ref, going up to him, pleading your case, but rolling around on the ground was just so over the top and unnecessary,
Yeah.
So
on the other LeBron note, there's just been a lot of hype lately about what he's doing at 38 years old, all these big games he's putting up, and it's very, very impressive, of course. I believe last night, or it was the night before, he's the first person at the age of 38 to post a triple-double. So, I mean, he's playing really great for his age. It's impressive. However, and this doesn't take away from what he's doing, people are like, man, no one's ever done this before. This is amazing, blah, blah, blah. 38. Wow, look at this. LeBron's the GOAT now. Look at this. I'm like, hang on. Okay. The NBA existed before 1990. Okay.
Right.
I want to go back to, I believe the year is 1985. there was this little player you may have heard of named Kareem Abdul-Jabbar on the Lakers. 1985, he was the Finals MVP at the age of 38. So this doesn't take away from LeBron, but let's give some credit to some things that have happened in the past. You know, I'm going to take Finals MVP at that age over anything else. You know, so it just is. Why is Kareem? Everyone's like, is it Jordan? Is it LeBron? Who's the GOAT? Blah, 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 blah. I hate that. I'm like, what about Kareem? Kareem has a hell of a resume. And the reason also that I bring up Kareem is 38. LeBron in the next week or so will pass Kareem on the all-time points list. And also, I mean, that's incredible, obviously.
Yeah.
Obviously. I do want to add that back in Kareem's day, when he was Lou Alcindor playing for the UCLA Bruins, 4 years playing for the Bruins, because by rules, he was not allowed to play in the NBA, even though it was pretty clear his like junior year at UCLA. And I know this, my mom was there at the same time. She's the same age. He was the best basketball player on the planet, probably. And everyone could see it, but he couldn't go to the NBA yet. So that was 4 years that nowadays he would have gone straight to the NBA.
Yeah. Imagine how many more points he would have had, right?
Yeah.
If he went straight over. Yeah.
So we're talking about, some might say Walden, but they played together. Kareem is the best college player in history.
Yeah.
And one of the best NBA players in history, throwing that together. I kind of feel like given how much he had to start later, we got to give him a little credit for that as well.
Yeah.
And
100%. Yeah.
Like, I'm not sure Jordan's the GOAT over Kareem either. I mean, you could give it I'm all about Jordan. He was the most dominant at his peak. And my best comparison sports-wise, oddly, is to golf. I always say Jordan had the highest high. In his prime, he was, the best and just dominant. And that's like Tiger Woods during Tiger's, 10-year stretch from 99 to 2009.
Nice.
Pure dominance, more than anybody has dominated the sport. I'm going to put Bill Russell aside because that's a whole different era and completely different. But LeBron now and Kareem are really competing for the Jack Nicklaus. And I would say Kareem is like the Jack Nicklaus, where
the longevity.
He won more championships, the longevity, the crazy records, but didn't have the same quite peak dominance of Jordan, And so, and LeBron's in that conversation in the same way. But Kareem just gets forgotten, like way forgotten. Look up his resume.
He does.
It's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah.
People are prisoners of the moment.
He's very underrated, which
is weird to say.
With everything he did. Yeah. But I agree. Yeah, completely. I was just gonna go back because we're still kind of NBA tangentially with the LeBron thing. The fact that the referees had to come out and give a statement, basically saying that they're so sorry.
They lose sleep at night,
like that. And this is the thing that I know we kind of went away from it, but I wanted to add that in, like the fact that they felt like they had to do that because LeBron is who he is and had the reaction he had is so ridiculous. And the NBA caters to him and to his, you know what I mean? To all his passive aggressive stuff and his tantrums and this and that. And it's just,
I mean, it was a regular season game in January. If it was a playoff game, by all means, throw a tantrum and be upset. It's a regular season game in January.
Have you ever seen them apologize to anyone else ever?
No.
The referees like that publicly? I mean, maybe on the side. Maybe on the side.
But not like a publicly issued statement.
I missed that call. Right. Yeah, right. I'm just like...
Honestly, I think that was like, Lakers fans are insufferable. Shut the fuck up.
Yeah.
Let's just release something and maybe that'll get them to shut up.
Or, they're sending the league stuff behind the scenes saying, complaining and moaning. And the league felt like they had, the referees felt like they had to put something out.
But you're right. It's completely goofy.
So lame. Anyways. I think, and we said LeBron is about, 90 points away now, I think, because he played last night in New York.
Yeah, so he's going to pass Kareem very, very soon. And like I said, not taking away from his accomplishments.
No,
but people forget about Kareem, like Kareem's longevity.
Yeah. Forgot about Dre.
Otherwise, in the NBA, got some teams kind of sliding around. The Pelicans have been on a nosedive. I think they're 1-9 in their last 10, and
Wow.
plummeted in
Well,
the
they've had a
standings.
lot of injuries.
8 or 9 game
Zion
losing
out.
streak. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was interesting. I mean, first of all, I don't complain about all-star game selections because it's a vote. It's a media vote with a fan vote.
Yeah.
And it's just it's a popularity contest, and complaining
Right.
about who got in the all-star game, who got snubbed, it's so dumb. It's
Yeah.
who cares? Now, if you want to get upset about all NBA selections, by all means have at it.
Because
That's legit.
that affects contracts and money and everything else.
Yeah, and it's not a fan vote.
That's a
There's
bigger
no
deal.
Twitter
Right.
nonsense going on, right? Complaining about the
right.
All-Star game is just it's such a boring, exhausting thing that happens every year. So some people are upset that Zion was in the starting lineup because he's missed 20 games of the team's 49 games. And that's a legit argument, and especially with Embiid, and it was Philly fans mostly complaining, Embiid's not starting over Zion.
Yeah.
And he should be, for sure. But you know what? Who cares? It's the All-Star game.
Yeah.
Embiid will be a reserve player anyway.
And he might even be a starter because who knows if Kevin Durant's going to actually play, right? Because he's still injured.
Well, and Zion too. Is Zion still banged up?
I think he's going to play, but I mean that could be two spots.
Who cares? So he'll be there.
Yeah.
Don't complain about the All-Star game. It's such a silly thing to complain about.
Yeah, I don't think
and it's
he's
halfway through the
much.
season. Who cares?
Yeah. The West is still super bunched up. There's a lot of teams that are at 500 or a game above or a game below or 2 games above. It's like everybody's in that same.
Yeah, the Warriors won 3 straight games, and now they're the 5th seed. They were just the 12th seed like a second ago.
Yeah.
and we said this before the season started that the West is so deep that it's going to be a wild, wild finish the last month of the season. And we got some predictions wrong, others right. That one we were spot on.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, they're the 5th seed. They're right around some of the teams right below them, but they're also 2.5 games out of the 3rd spot.
Yeah. Well, and the play-in aspect of the playoffs is going to be very interesting because it could be a matter of a team loses 3 games at the end and goes from the 5th seed to not making the play-in or something crazy. They're the 11th seed. I think we're going to see some real wild finishes to the season, which is great. So I'm a huge fan of the play-in.
The last week of the season is going to be really interesting, I think, to see which
or
teams,
even longer.
Or who's resting, who's not, who who has the easier schedule. It's going to be wild. Yeah.
Yeah. So it would be a dramatic finish anyway, but having that play-in aspect with teams wanting to get that 4th, 5th seed and not be 6th or 7th, or I'm sorry, want that 6th seed, not be 7th or 8th, having to play the 9th and 10th seeds in the play-in games, right?
Yeah.
And so that really just adds different levels to it, for sure.
Oh, yeah.
If you're the 5 seed, you can't, and you don't have a good amount of distance from the teams behind you, you can't take your foot off the gas at all, or you could fall right back into that. So and with so many teams in the mix, it's going to be great.
Yep. Yeah, and I think the tops of each conference are interesting. They've kind of separated themselves a little bit. More in the East, I feel like the top of the East is really, they're kind of all in the same spot, very close, within a game or 2 from each other, and a lot of good teams out there. So it'll be interesting
in
to
the
see
West,
who.
Memphis and Denver are pulling away a bit as well, but it's still very
Memphis
close.
Memphis also just lost 5 in a row.
Yeah, I think they're missing Steven Adams more than I thought.
Yeah, I remember thinking that was going to be a big one because he kind of stabilizes their defense and allows Jaren Jackson to do other things. Now Jaren Jackson has to be that guy who's
protecting the rim more than being able to freelance around. That's true.
And he does have a foul problem. So if he fouls out or is foul hampered in a game, then who are they going to play? So it's interesting. King's still looking good, still lighting that beam. I mean, man, I like Sacramento. I think they're a great story, and I was like, oh, this is great. But I kind of expected at some point that they were gonna
Crash back down to earth. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, even like start playing like 500 ball, but
they're getting better. I think they're getting better.
They're looking really good, man. Mike Brown has that team humming.
That was another one where people were upset that Sabonis was snubbed on the All-Star selection.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like, well, he's not that established a name yet. Like
right.
A lot of casual fans don't even know who he is really. And so you were not going to expect it. He has to, you kind of have to pay your dues for a year. So if the Kings keep playing this way, make the playoffs, get that big national TV audience, he can put his name on the map, and then he plays well next year, and boom, he'll be right there. So it's just kind of how it goes.
Yeah. And they haven't announced the reserves yet, right? So, I mean, I think he could definitely...
Oh, he'll be a reserve.
That.
I'd be pretty surprised if he's not a reserve.
I wonder if they get two. Maybe Fox also.
Also. Although it's tough to be a guard.
It is, but...
I mean, John Morant has to be one of the reserves.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's pretty tough in the West as a guard.
I mean, I agree. I just think there's some people who were always staples of All-Star games who kind of fell out of that this year, right? I mean, with, like, for instance, like some of the Warriors guys who were always All-Stars. Like, do you see them both being All-Stars this year? Reserves?
No.
So, I mean, you got two spots there that, in years past would have been completely gone. It'll be interesting. I don't know who's going to get it, but I'd like to see Sacramento get some love because they've had a great year. So,
but hey, Sacramento fans, don't get all caught up in the disrespect. Just worry about your team making the playoffs and hopefully advancing, and put yourselves on the map. That's what matters. So.
Yep, absolutely.
All right. Well, good recap, and we'll be back next week to do a Super Bowl preview. We want a little more time to kind of break down this matchup, and and I think we'll also maybe talk about some of our favorite prop bets, which is always such a big deal with the Super Bowl as well.
Can't wait.
All right. Thank you for listening. And as always, please subscribe and/or leave us reviews. We really appreciate it. And we'll talk to you guys next week.
All right. Peace.